Lori here. I'm here today to do a reading recommendation for you, and I'm going to kind of talk through all the spooky books that I have read in the last couple of years and books that I think you would really enjoy. So, the way I'm going to break this down is I'm going to talk about some pure mysteries and thrillers that I really wound up enjoying. I'm going to talk through some middle grade books that have some really spooky presence, like spooky characters or spooky settings. And then I'm going to talk about some YA fantasy novels that I think are lush and really spooky or have like a creepy setting. So let's get into it. The books I'm going to chat through are all middle grade that I have really enjoyed. So the first book I'm going to chat through is The Dark Deep by Ali Kandi and Brandon Reich. This one I really wound up liking. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Stranger Things, I'll be honest. I read the first book 2 years ago. I actually have the second one that I should actually add it to my TBR. But it's definitely like a lighter version, I would say, of Stranger Things, not as scary. But it was such a fun read. It basically follows these four characters. They wind up encountering this figment or this thing that kind of takes on their fears. And in the first book, I found it to be super fun and a super well-paced novel. It has two authors. There's a bunch of different characters. So I definitely do want to dive into book two. The fun story about this arc is it's like I was the first book that they ever signed together as an author pair. But it was great. And at this point, I was really craving more material kind of like Stranger Things. And I found this one to be super fun. I'm going to, right after this, I'm going to actually go add that book to my TBR because I haven't read the sequel in quite a while. But this one, I thought it was not as scary as Stranger Things, but also dealing with something like fear for kids is really like a potent thing that kids fear. So, and I also really like the diversity of the characters when I read it. The next book I'm going to chat about is another book that I read very recently, and that is Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega, and it follows two characters, for Lucy and her best friend Sid. And when some magical spirits wind up making their way into their life, they have to go save the day. I found this book to be so adorable. I love the tag quote. Be prepared, respect the dead, and always have a cat. I thought this book was incredibly diverse. It dealt with very fun elements of, culture, like spirits. I think it's like very the action-packed adventures of Ghostbusters delivers a thrilling, spooky, and delightfully sweet debut novel. I remember I read this super quickly, and I just remember I really liked both characters a lot. I thought it was a very fun story, very heartfelt, but it also dealt a lot with like ghosts and your family's past. And it was a really enjoyable story, and I wound up giving this one 4 stars. So I highly recommend you go read it, check out her story, and I think she's gonna probably write a sequel in the future, but it was great. Another book I read super recently was also Love Sugar Magic: A Dash of Trouble by Anna Mercadio. I got this, I think, a couple of years ago back in Owl Crate Jr. But this is about a young girl named Leonora, or Leo. I think they call her Leo. And she winds up working at a bakery with her parents. But little does she know the bakery is magic, and she's actually a witch. And you kind of follow her, kind of determined to kind of get more involved in the witchy side of her business. And it's set, I think, the weekend after Halloween, Dia de la Muerta, or it's set like around the Day of the Dead. And I really wound up enjoying it. I thought the magic elements were super fun. She also had a fun friendship that dynamic that I really liked. But I love all books about magic. And this is definitely a magic system on like the lighter side. It's not as spooky or scary. It has a lot to do with cooking. They have recipes in here as well. And it was a really fun read. And I highly recommend you check it out. This one is definitely a little bit of a darker, spookier take on the middle grade set. But that is The Dreadful Tale of Prospero Redding by Alexandra Bracken. This is a book where Prospero is very unlucky in his life. He does not always have the best of luck. But when a curse is reawakened in him and he grows up in like a haunted house, it kind of sets his world on fire when this little poltergeist named Alistair winds up trying to take over his body. And it is a duology. I definitely prefer the first book a little bit more to the second one, but I love the haunted house elements. I thought she wrote creepy and spooky really, really well for the middle grade set, and I wound up really, really liking this one as well. And I wound up giving this one 4 stars. There is a sequel, and I wound up liking the sequel, but I didn't love it. This one was very much more focused on the haunted house, and there was a couple of family twists and turns that I didn't really expect. But again, I wound up really, really liking this one as well. But those are all the physical books I'm going to chat about. There's so many like middle grade series that I like. Keeper of the Lost Cities really is not as spooky, but it does have a really, really well crafted story with a lot of different creatures and side characters. But these are the 4 books that I wanted to chat about in this video. So now we're going to move on to thrillers. The first book I'm going to chat about is one that I have long loved, and I read this close to like 3 or 4 years ago, and this thriller has still stuck with me, and I'm actually hoping to reread it this month, and that is Don't Look Back by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So I don't even remember the girl's name, but the book starts off that you find this girl, and she's walking on the side of a road. She has no shoes on. She looks like she's been through hell. And she was found working on the side of the road. She has no memory of what happened in her whole entire life. She doesn't have any memory of her parents, but also not what happened in the past like a couple of days leading up to her. The last thing anyone knows is she and her best friend went out and they never came back. She is returned. Her best friend is not. And it was really interesting to me because she was such a different type of character. Everything that you learn about this character is nothing like she is now after she lost her memory. So it was really like a dichotomy of also her trying to solve this mystery. What happened to her best friend? Where is she? All these mysteries, but also really dealing with like what happens if you learn like you're not a good person. And that's really what this character was dealing with. I thought the mystery was so well done, so well crafted. Really, I mean, it did have some predictable elements towards the end, but overall, this book was so, like, unique and so different, and I wound up really, really enjoying it, and I wound up giving it 5 stars the first time that I read it. I'm excited to reread it. I did get it on Audible because it was part of the Audible Plus catalog, I think. But yeah, that was a book that I was really, really excited about. I also am in the middle of reading the Escaping from Houdini series, the Stalking Jack the Ripper series from Carrie Maniscalco. I just literally finished this one. They all are inspired by some time period in the past. The first one was about Stalking Jack the Ripper. This one was about, the previous one was about Prince Dracula. This one was about Houdini. And I thought they were really, really good. I think I prefer book 1 and book 3. Book 2 was okay. I'm really excited to dive into the last one in this series. But they're all historical fiction inspired mysteries that deal with, basically big thrillers in the past, like big thriller or big killers in the past, and this was great. I wound up really, really liking it. I would prefer that I would recommend you guys get the audiobooks because I love the narrator, but also like if you do get the physical box, they do have pictures. I couldn't actually read this book because my arc didn't have the correct ending, but I wound up really, really enjoying it. So I would definitely recommend this series if you've not picked it up. And if you are struggling with book 2, maybe pick up the audiobook because that was how I wound up really, really enjoying it. And then the last thriller we're going to chat about in this video is Chasing Starlight by Tara Bailey Black. I read this super recently. It's a 1930s murder mystery set on a Hollywood film set where a girl named Katie is sent there to live with her grandpa, who's a former movie star, and she winds up getting sucked into a mystery. And it was like an incredibly well-paced novel. Like this, my arc was formatted a little bit oddly, but I found it to be super well-paced. I like the side characters, and I love 1930s, and I also love the Hollywood setting. So really, really strong. I do want to pick up her other past backlog because those books are even more creepy. This was definitely a later thriller, but I really, really was quite fond of it. And then we're going to move on to the lush fantasy worlds that I would love for you to explore this holiday season. And by holiday, I mean Halloween. Sorry. But the first series is no big shock, and that is the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. I really like the first 2 books. I like the concluding novel. I just think it could have given me like a little bit more. But you basically follow this girl named Jude. She's a human set in a fairy world after her parents were killed. And it's basically Game of Thrones in a fairyverse. And I wound up really being captivated by book 1 and 2. I think book 2 was definitely like my favorite, but it was really, really interesting, compelling. There's such a strong love to hate romance at the heart of it. The world is compelling and fascinating, and I wound up really, really liking it. So this is definitely a series that I recommend. I recommend book 1 and book 2 a little bit more. I thought that the concluding novel was okay. I think it could have been fleshed out a little bit more. But I really thought the world, which I would consider very, very lush and captivating and it's like, engaging, was super well done. So I definitely would recommend it. And I love Holly Black's writing. The next one is just kind of a general one because we are in the middle of like the Halloween season. But any of the Shadowhunters series really do fit this. I just picked up this one because I love Simon. But really they have they have a lot of different mystical type of creatures. And I really like them. I think she writes like Holly Black. They both write such really, I'll try to hold these both up. They really write both two very, very captivating worlds and such different types of characters. They also put their own twist on it. So yeah, these are two series that I think have very, very similar elements. But one is more of a, a fantasy world and one is more of a modern world and a paranormal world. So still really, really enjoyable, but these are series that I recommend. I do like the later series in that I struggle because I like Simon as a character. So I like the first series, but I don't like the first 2 books. So I like everything after City of Glass on are the books that I really enjoy. And then with this series, I just prefer the first 2 books. But I did think the conclusion was okay. We're going to talk a little bit about vampires. I don't physically have my copies of the Vampire Academy and Bloodlines, but I'll post a picture here. I have talked about Twilight until I'm blue in the face because I really didn't like Twilight. I will say that. I didn't like Twilight. But the Shadowhunters kind of started warming me up to vampires a little bit, especially when Simon turned into a vampire for a couple of books. But then I wound up picking up the Vampire Diaries and Rochelle Mead and Bloodlines, and it really was such a ingenious take on vampires, and I wound up really enjoying that world and those characters. So that was a series that I was really enjoyed, and I love those books. So that's definitely a series. It takes place at a school for vampires, but then you also have like guards as well as their training, and you follow that series. And then Bloodlines follows a totally new character, Sydney Sage, and she's an alchemist. And more drama ensues. But I wound up really liking the characters in those books a lot. The world building, the twist, the mystery. Definitely classic YA fantasy, but really, really fun vampires. I also do want to mention another vampire book that is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. I actually wound up reading this last fall, and I wound up liking it. I didn't wind up loving it, but it was an element of vampires that I hadn't read, and it was a little bit unique and a little bit different. I will say, if you're going into this thinking it's going to be a pure vampire novel, I would say this is definitely a foundational novel setting up the series. I haven't read The Damned yet. I actually might try to read it this month if I get around to it. This is more of a thriller, I'll be honest with you. A lot more of a thriller than I would say a vampire novel at this stage of the game. But it is pitched as a vampire novel. Anywhere this book is pitched as a vampire novel. And I think that that's kind of poor marketing because it really isn't. But it does talk about vampires. And at the start of this book from all the marketing that the villain is a vampire. So I liked it. I didn't love it. I'm curious what happens in The Damned. But I did like the characters in it. So this was actually an enjoyable read. I think I wound up giving it 3 stars, and I'm excited to finally dive into The Damned. This book really just has more to do with its lush world, and that is Shadows Between Us by Tricia Levasseur. I really like Tricia Levasseur's Daughter of a Siren Queen duology. I also liked Warrior of the Wild, and then I wound up picking up Shadows Between Us. And this is like the Slytherin romance we all know and love or want. But it basically follows this girl named Alessandra, and she is determined to woo the king and then kill him and become queen. Super fast-paced read. All of Tricia Levasseur's books are super fast-paced, but it has a lush fantasy world, a lush magic world, very, very sex positive as well. And it had a romance that I adored. And I really am excited to see what she writes next. She really captivates you from page one and doesn't let you go. And this book definitely did that. So I wound up giving this book 4.5 stars, and I really thought Alessandra as a character was kick butt and take names, and that was really impressive. Another series I wanted to shout out is the Hearts of Fierce and Broken series or A Curse of Dark and Lonely, I think the first book is called. But the first book followed 2 different characters, and this book followed Gray and Leah Marie, who I think is the daughter of somebody. But I really wound up liking this book, and it kind of took the myth in book 1 of Beauty and the Beast and definitely expanded that myth by a lot in this book. But again, it's such a lush world, such a cool world. I really liked Gray in book 1. I love that he finally got like his own book to really shine in. And I'm really excited for the book A Vow So Deadly that comes out in early 2021. But again, this book was definitely became my favorite in the series, and I really like what they did with Gray and Lila because she was awesome. And then the last book I'm going to chat about in this video is Bonecryer's Moon by Catherine Purdy. I read this right at the start of quarantine, and I simply loved it. It has such a well-developed magic system. There's a girl named Elise has been prepared. Elise basically is going to be the Bone Crier, and she is going to be able to summon souls. But when something doesn't go her way, and she winds up encountering an unexpected boy that she is convinced she has to kill to become matriarch of this family, things go horribly wrong. She has a sister her best friend named Sabine is also involved. The magic system was really, really cool. I love the dual point of views that we got. It was another book that captivated me from page 1. I thought the world was super lush and super captivating. The characters were super fun, and I really liked that we are definitely going to get a second book. There's even a sneak peek in this edition, but it was amazing. I wound up adoring it, and it's another book that I think that you should definitely consider picking up. So yeah, those are all of my Halloween-themed spooky racks in a bunch of different categories. Let me know in the comments what are some of the books that you have read recently that are super creepy that you think other people should check out. And I'll talk to you for another video soon. Bye, guys.